The two jurors from our state seem firm in their stance for acquittal, which seems to speak for their constituents. So, will the long battle impact politics here this election year or even in the near future? We'll hear two sides. Meantime, a second stopover by an unconventional candidate who hopes his billfold can be his breakthrough. And this, with the company he helped build still calculating its Christmas earnings, an assessment of an invaluable Arkansas executive. Arkansas Week, next.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
And hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. An executive who understood both retailing and RBIs has passed on. We'll have a look at his legacy. Trouble for some workers in South Arkansas, but the larger community there seems largely untroubled. Those stories and more coming up on our Reporters Roundtable. First, the cauldron of Washington. We will not here acquit nor convict the President of the United States, but we'll get a read on how the impeachment trial just may be impacting Arkansas. From the right, State Senator Mark Johnson, Republican of Conway, and from the left, Democratic consultant Michael Cook. Gentlemen, thanks very much for being with us. So have at it. Well,
see, first I have to correct you. While I love Conway and it's my hometown, I live in Ferndale now.
All right.
And you and the Lieutenant Governor both made that slide.
Well, you know,
but I'm
the
proud
Johnson
of Conway.
Name is somehow inextricably tied to my
I realize
mind
that's
Conway.
true. That's true.
But at any rate,
this is such an interesting time because while certainly there's controversy nationally about President Trump, in Arkansas, he's extremely popular, and the impeachment has probably added to that. He's probably at 70 to 75% coming up in the election in Arkansas. Now, I realize that doesn't win you the presidency with electoral votes in the blue states, but I actually think that we're looking at this whole process being a positive thing for Republicans in Arkansas, and especially at the local and district level. I would, if I were a Democrat county official around the rural parts of the state, I'd be grateful that you had a 4-year term and didn't have to run on the ballot with Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or someone else at the top of the ticket.
Well, Michael Cook.
You know, here in Arkansas, I can't disagree with Trump being popular among the people of the state. He's going to win Arkansas by a very large margin, regardless of whoever the nominee is.
Well, the senator just suggested as much as 3/4 of the popular vote. Now, he did better than 60, well over 60%.
Right, against Hillary Clinton. Yeah, we'll see, you know, who the nominee is and how it shakes out. You know, the thing about this, the way the media is now, is that when this trial is over, of course he's going to be acquitted. It's the Republicans rule the U.S. Senate. Everything moves so quickly. Like in 4 months from now, are we even going to remember what had happened? It seemed, like when he took out that Iranian general, that seemed like it was 8 months ago, but it was, but it was like weeks ago that this happened. So I think it's too early to tell, at least on the state level, what this impact could have. Well, it moves so quickly.
Would you concur with the senator, though, that the impeachment proceedings have tended to harden that base or solidify that base, even expand it?
I don't think it's expanded. I really don't think it's, he, at least in Arkansas, he has what he has. I don't think he's going to bring on new converts because of the impeachment hearings, or that's going to harden it. His base has always been strong here. Again, I just don't see it making that much of a difference in Arkansas. Now, nationally, whole different ballgame.
Senator, you talked about the impact on down ballot races. Are we going to see basically, in your estimation, quote, safe Democratic districts such as they exist continue to be staunchly blue, or is there any erosion there? Any erosion at all?
I think there's some serious erosion, Steve, and to kind of not disagree with Michael, but to point out some differences. You had a lot of people in 2016 that voted for Trump reluctantly. It was down between him and Hillary Clinton, and they voted for President Trump, but they weren't so sure. They liked what he said, but they just were a little skeptical. Some of his mannerisms. After all, in many cases he's an obnoxious New York Yankee, and that sometimes doesn't play in the socially conservative Arkansas. However, his actions, both with the economy, his Supreme Court nominees, have converted a lot of those people who were rather lukewarm Trump supporters into seriously strong Trump supporters, and I think that's the thing that will make a difference in our local races and the down ballot races. I would not want to be a county. Of course, county clerks aren't up this time. They're in the middle of a 4-year term, but a JP or a nominally conservative Democrat in the legislature trying to balance that out in the 2020 election. I think that he's going to have some long coattails, and we may see some more upsets such as we saw in the 2018.
The social policies, Michael Cook, abortion, school prayer, a couple of others. Does that threaten some erosion in some of those blue precincts?
I don't see it. I mean, the big fight, frankly, is going to be on the legislative level this time around. Democrats have done a good job of fielding candidates throughout the state, and there'll be some fights, there'll be some wins, there'll be some losses. Who they are. I think there's some districts here in Pulaski County and Northwest Arkansas where Democrats might be able to pull off a few surprises on the legislative level. I think the things that Democrats will be fighting over won't be those issues. I think it'll be health care, about how Republicans and Donald Trump are trying to take away your health care insurance. That's a major issue. Education is always a major issue that we'll constantly be fighting about. I think Democrats have a better handle on that issue. So I think those are the big topics that we'll be fighting over in this upcoming election in 2020.
Along those lines, Senator, it took Democrats exactly 1/2 of 1 nanosecond to jump on Mr. Trump's remark that, Social Security, Medicare, it may be on the table.
Well,
is that an opening?
Well, Steve, they always used to say,
since walked it back a little bit.
They said that that's the third rail of politics, and I don't think that particular thing has changed. But certainly, the president, and again, he benefits from this, and sometimes he has to, as you say, walk it back. He says what's on his mind. I think a lot of the attraction people have is that he does that. He is who he is, and they like it. But every now and then you have to do that. But I think that's an issue best left for proper deliberative politics and not hip shot type politics like we saw in that case. But anytime we're looking at the kind of fiscal unsustainable fiscal situation that we have on the federal level now, everything has to be considered, and even those things that once were considered the third rail, and certainly those are the two biggest ones, but everything, even education policy and what kind of money we spend on the good things, when we're looking at the kind of national debt we have, it's unsustainable, and I think people have to be honest on both sides of the aisle about that fact.
Well, I think what happens, though, is the classic Republican strategy. You give tax cuts to the wealthy, which then explodes the deficit. And so the Republicans, oh my gosh, we've got to lower the deficit. Maybe we need to cut Social Security and Medicare. It's a playbook we've seen over and over again since Reagan, and that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to come back, oh my gosh, the deficits are so high. Well, the Republicans increased it by $1 trillion, so of course we have high deficits. So that's the Republican playbook: cut revenue and then cut earned benefits like Social Security and Medicare.
Well, of course, Steve, Republicans still want to cut taxes, and we want to cut spending as well. But historically, and I think President Reagan sort of set the curve on this, the problem was not the tax cuts. Neither are the problem in Arkansas. Our tax cuts have generated tremendous economic activity. We have record low unemployment, and I'm very proud that we have extremely low unemployment, historically low unemployment in the African American community, to the point that we're seeing some people that are predicting that President Trump could receive 10 to 15% of the African American vote in this election. Now, not saying everything rides on economic statistics, but it's certainly something that bears looking at. A lot of us believe that if you put money back in people's pockets, that stimulates the economy, and in many cases stimulates government revenues.
Well, but it doesn't quite stimulate it enough to pay for itself, though, which has long been the selling point, though, has it not?
There's always a delay. You know, the Reagan tax cuts in '81 didn't come along in '82, and you had the folks like Jim McDougal running for Congress on that issue, but by '83 and '84, the country was soaring economically, and of course President Reagan won overwhelming re-election. So there's always a delay. You're going to get...
well, there were some new revenues along the way, too.
Well, and also the thing about it, no Republicans are campaigning on the Republican tax cut. In 2018, there were no Republicans on the national level campaigning on the tax cut. There are no Republicans campaigning on the Trump's tax cut now, because people realize that it didn't help the average person. It helped out those who make a lot of money, those corporations that have a lot of cash. Those are the ones that benefit, which is why they don't really talk about it that much.
All those corporations that are hiring more and more people and lowering our unemployment rate.
And paying people low wages.
You can't ignore that, though, Michael. That's where, you know, the idea is, does the money go in the
deficit too?
Pockets of the people who own stock in corporations? That means everyone that has a pension plan. Or does it, when you see the unemployment rate drop to the point that it has now, I mean, these are considered frictional unemployment rates. The economy is doing great because of the policies that President Trump has put forth. And I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much here in Arkansas, but we've had 3 historic tax cuts in Arkansas. We catch some lip from the Democrats over the last one because it was the last piece to go in. That was an upper income tax cut, but we'd already cut taxes for middle income and poor people in Arkansas, and I hope we continue to look for opportunities like that.
The senator went first. Michael, that means you get the last word.
Well, again, it's the age-old debate over tax cuts. That's the only thing Republicans seem to have to offer nowadays. They offer really nothing on health care. All they want to do is try to take away our health care insurance. They have no real plans for public education. It's now tougher if you want to go to college. If you're a middle-class family trying to pay for college, you have to take out massive loans to get there, all because of the tax cut policies led by the Republicans that have hurt people in the everyday Arkansans in the middle class just trying to make it.
We could go on, and we will at a later date. Gentlemen, I hope you'll come back.
Thank you, Steve.
Senator
Thank you.
Michael Cook, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. And we're back now with a couple of old pals. Michael Hiblin is news director of KUAR, Public Radio in Central Arkansas. Lance Turner, reporter, editor for Arkansas Business. And thanks, guys, for coming in. Well, we just heard 2 pros, one left, one right. Michael, not much movement of the needle, except maybe farther to the right.
Well, it will probably reinforce the positions people already have, whether they like or dislike Trump. Senator Johnson brought up an interesting point, though, about President Trump could end up more popular here in Arkansas. So much of this impeachment trial has been based on the format of President Clinton's impeachment trial. And I had talked with Senator John Boozman before the start of the trial, and he brought up the fact that President Clinton came out of his impeachment trial more popular, and it ended up hurting Republicans because many felt it was an unfair process. So many of the things that you heard early on in the investigations of President Clinton didn't pan out. When you think about the Whitewater and the other dealings that were investigated by Ken Starr, who ironically is now one of President Trump's attorneys in this. So it will be interesting to see how things do work out, but we've had, obviously, this is the first week of hearing arguments. So far it's been the Democratic impeachment managers. Saturday, the Republicans, or rather the president's attorneys, will begin making their arguments.
And you spoke, you had some time with Senator Boozman one-on-one this past week. He's As his colleague from Arkansas, Mr. Cotton, they both seem squarely. Haven't heard anything yet, they say.
They say, a few interesting details. He had said he wouldn't be surprised if witnesses did end up being called. He expects there will be a lot of questions once things are presented. Now, this was obviously before the rules were finalized on Tuesday. He also expected this would take much longer than it's looking like maybe it might now. We don't know, but apparently we've heard since had encouraged Mitch McConnell to not try to rush this as much as the White House and apparently Republican leadership had been wanting. He also, we are reading this morning in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, read about how, a lot of the senators have been spending their time. Boozman apparently has been taking notes and watching carefully as the proceedings have gone on. And other senators, we've heard about working crossword puzzles or one even falling asleep. But this is obviously continuing to go on, and we'll find out reaction.
Yeah, thus far it hasn't changed. As far as anyone knows, hasn't changed a single vote. We also have this, and kind of an Arkansas connection, and that's the messy business of Hunter Biden, who, as the time we tape this broadcast on Friday, has been commanded by a judge to appear in a Batesville court in the paternity business. Now, the president's advocates in Washington are obviously doing all they can to make hay of this, demanding that if there are witnesses, well, Mr. Biden should be at the top of the list.
That's right, and we'll see what happens. I think with this Arkansas case, I think it's nothing but good for the Trump White House to be kicking up as much dust around Hunter Biden as they can, even as something as seemingly insignificant as a paternity case. I think it still helps them. They would like to see more attention focused on this paternity case, in fact, according to Tom Cotton this week. But I think what's at play there, too, is, and why he's been threatened with contempt of court here in Arkansas, is the turning over of documents, financial documents, tax records even. And even Tom Cotton has sort of finds himself very suspicious about someone who would not turn over their tax records, and maybe that means that there's something to hide there, which is interesting on a couple levels. But certainly, it helps them to have any dirt about Biden and Burisma being kicked up and taking some of the focus off allegations against the president. And I think as the Republicans, as the White House begins its defense over the weekend, drawing a Saturday start, which is for them kind of unfortunate, I would think, from an attention standpoint. But I think you'll hear more about that. But I also think, they seem to be signaling, at least today, that it's going to be, they may not use their full time in terms of their defense. They may try to, a couple days and be done with it and deny, and maybe not even defend point by point allegations, because I think they are betting that, there's nothing to gain from any of that. People's minds are made up in the Senate, and the vote is going to go their way.
Yeah.
Well, on to, we had another visit by a presidential candidate, his second, and that's Mr. Bloomberg came back to Arkansas this past week.
Yeah, Michael
Why?
Bloomberg. Well, it's apparently part of a strategy. He announced his...
he's welcome, and they all are.
Well, and it got a little bit of
Come on down.
attention.
Yeah.
The regular folks who came out. He took part in Little Rock's Martin Luther King Jr. parade on Monday, and he filed too late in the season to get on the ballot in the first 4 primary states in the country. So he is focusing on, not only Super Tuesday states is what he told me, but also all other remaining contests. But clearly he is putting a focus on Arkansas. I think this is more than any other presidential candidate has given any thought to. So it's interesting seeing him coming to take part in this. And I did get to speak with him for a little bit before the start of the parade. He said it was very intentional that he came on the Martin Luther King holiday because he wanted the history of civil rights in Little Rock, and in particular the Central High School, 1957. He had been in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which also has a rather notorious history the day before that. So he had a message to convey to people. But back to why he's here. The second visit.
It needs to be said, he's still trying to politically atone for the stop and frisk policies
Yes.
that he imposed in Manhattan.
That is also a key factor. But he's got this strategy of just focusing on perhaps if the delegates are split elsewhere, then maybe if he can do well on Super Tuesday, then maybe he can really start to develop some momentum. That remains to be seen, but it is, and really, the thinking is we'll probably know by the end of the day when the results are in on that Super Tuesday election, March 3rd. We should know whether Bloomberg is out of the water or still in this.
Lance, some discouraging news for Clark County, and yet Clark County is the scene of potentially some good long-term news.
Could be, that's right. Yeah, this week the Danfoss plant in Arkadelphia announced that it would close by the end of the year. They make air compressors and HVAC-related equipment, and that plant has been down there for a long time. 170 people will ultimately lose their jobs because that plant is closing, and the reason given is that demand for that particular product has just fallen off. They've got other, they're an international company, so they've got factories all over the world. So there's some consolidation happening, and at some point in that history, that consolidation has benefited that plant, but this time it was time to shut it down. And talking to local leaders down there at the local chamber, they had sort of seen this coming. They had noticed hours being reduced for some of those workers, so they weren't terribly surprised that it was happening. But they weren't completely down about it because they feel like they've got some big employers that are coming online in that area that are going to be able to soak up those jobs. There's a French company that's purchased the old Alcoa recycling facility in that same industrial park. And they are looking to hire about 140 people. There's another company that's going to hire another 10 to 15. They feel like they've got very specific examples of people who are coming in that could soak up those jobs once they're able to retrain some of those workers. And of course, the big elephant in the room down there is the Sun Paper plant, which is sort of in something of a limbo right now. That the plans for that plant had gotten retooled. They're going to make a different type of product than what they originally announced, and so they had to start their permitting process all over again. But there's also the matter of the U.S.-China trade dispute, and I think as long as that's in the air, we've got a Phase 1 deal that was approved, but there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be ironed out between those two countries. And as long as that's happening, the future of that plant is going to kind of be a little hazy.
And this tonight also can't, with short time remaining,
yes.
Even the family of the founder say it is difficult to overstate the impact of David Glass on the world's largest corporation, and that's Walmart of Arkansas. Mr. Glass passed on.
Mm-hmm. That's right, yeah. There'll be a service for him and Rogers on Monday, a memorial service. Died at 85. He is a pivotal figure in retail and in business in America. He was Sam Walton's hand-picked successor, began as CEO in 1988 and ended his tenure in 2000. At that time, oversaw the phenomenal growth that made Walmart the modern global giant that it is today. And everything from supercenters launched under his watch, a big emphasis on the technology that powers that company. He knew about big data long before a lot of other people did. And so he definitely is a towering figure who will be missed for sure.
Well, he did some not only in Bentonville, but in Kansas City, he did some pretty good
Made a lot of folks
too.
happy with the Royals. They finally won a World Series in 2015, I believe, and he owned that team, sold it for $1 billion last year and bought it for like $96 million. So he knew what he was doing with baseball too.
Yeah, a decent return on the investment, as
That's
it
right.
were. Well, let's also check in very quickly on Christmas earnings. We're still awaiting, speaking of Walmart.
That's right, still awaiting. They're kind of the big ones sitting out there. I think retail sales for the period were up, the industry as a whole, but individual retailers are having problems. Target disappointed with its holiday sales. Some other retailers are struggling, JCPenney, Sears. Walmart will report next month. And so we'll know a lot more about what's happening there. They've made some executive changes at Walmart US and Sam's Club in recent days. And so what does that portend? We don't know. We'll wait to see the numbers in February.
All right, gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in. The passing of Mr. Glass was not the only one that we note. An old friend, Jim Lehrer of the PBS NewsHour, left us just a couple of days ago. He was instrumental. He and his partner, the late Robin McNeil, of course, were the driving force behind PBS NewsHour, as acclaimed today as it was in their day, which hopefully will continue at least in spirit. It was the privilege of some of us to spend a bit of time with Jim Lehrer over the years, and Mr. McNeil. We can assure you it was time well spent. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.